for Christmas. I'm going to make sure my sound's okay. I'm not sure how many people are going to come in because this is a holiday week. Schools are out and the courts are open until, I know they're closed for Christmas. I'm not sure about the day before and the day after, but we're going to talk about what's going on in those courts. And we're going to give some shout outs and thank yous. I've got my new sweater on that was given to me by one of my new favorite camera people. And so I want to give a shout out and a thank you for that. I guess they got tired of seeing me in my black clothing and got annoyed because I have a spider sweatsuit that has a thank you for that comment. But we're going to wait for a few more people. Is my sound okay in here? 2654. Can you hear me? Triple X 2654. Okay, and Johnny Bravo's coming in, so we'll wait a second because I need some moderators. We know the trolls are going to come in. Let me tell Johnny I'm already. Oh, Real Jingy, you're a moderator too, I think. Let me just make sure you're a moderator. Yep, you should be a moderator. So there's Johnny Bravo. So we get a lot of trolls coming in to these live streams. I used to get buffered here. I'm outside of the Los Gatos Town Hall and the police department, which you know I have shared lots of love with getting records this past year. And it's about to rain. I know you guys in Colorado aren't going to want to hear. Johnny, I'm glad you're here. You're a moderator. We've been getting a lot of trolls. So I want to remind my moderators, if you could please just kick out the comments when it gets off topic, personal attacks. If it gets political about something not related to what we're covering, then I'd like to see those comments deleted. And if someone's really a problem, you can boot them out of the chat. So I was just saying, I want to thank my camera person. I've had these few people who've been through the family courts who have been backing me up with some camera work lately. And I always need backup with camera work. And right now I've been working with two ladies. I have Puppy with me. She's always with me. She just ate a pup cup. And she wants to know why we're not going somewhere else, but she's going to get something in a little bit. And so I was working with these camera people, and one of my favorite moments, I think, of all time, it's hard to teach people how to naturally use their cameras. And if I can get all of you to start doing what these women started doing, it was really phenomenal. They had been holding their cameras in the vertical position when they were filming, recording when we were going out, either at police departments or whatever. And I would gently remind them to turn their camera into the horizontal position. But they didn't always pull their cameras out. They were still they were watching me. They were watching how I did it. And when I'm going to a police department, or I'm going to an attorney's office, or I am out on the street, I don't always leave my camera up in a really obvious position. But I do record frequently because I am recording for my news gathering. I want to remember what I see. And so on this particular day, we went to the law offices of Jessica Huey. We went to a parenting custody evaluator, and I'll get into those later on, John Orlando. I did a live stream, and as we were getting ready to leave, the police arrived. And we had a pretty good encounter with the police. Jessica Huey is a divorce attorney who sits on the Minors Counsel panel, and I'm going to go over that. But she is one of the most frequently appointed attorneys for children. We've had a lot of complaints about her. We've been investigating how much taxpayers have been paying her. And she started working as a parenting coordinator. So that's a private judge, and it's just another made-up word. And so we went to her offices to see if she was giving public access to her private judge proceedings. And she called the police on us. So I think for 2025, when I do a wrap-up video for this year, I'm going to go over all the attorneys who have called the police on us in the last year or year and a half, because there's a lot, and they're primarily divorce attorneys. They seem to not understand the First Amendment. They seem to not want any reporting. They never answer my requests for comment. And some of these people are being paid with taxpayer money. So just as we record the police and the activities, how they're doing their job, I'm going to record attorneys. And they can expect me, because if they are acting as a private judge and noticing their law offices as a courthouse, then we're going to go and see how good they are at giving public access to those proceedings. Because so far, we've seen attorneys just absolutely not understanding the First Amendment. In fact, I had an attorney, Nicole Myers, we're about to post a video on her, and she actually said that the only reason to ever record people is to either document or harass. And that's the mindset of attorneys. So we're going to document you, attorneys, especially you, Nicole Myers, who's acting as a parenting coordinator. So for those of you who are new to this channel, you will find that I do record the police, but I'm not watchdogging the police other than how they interact. I want to know how police officers write police reports. I want to see them on the streets and how they're interacting with the public and what we're getting when we hire these individuals. But my main focus is on these attorneys who are acting in and around either criminal court or family court, that are court appointed and that are paid with public money, because that is a huge area of concern. And simply being told, oh, these people are acting in the best interest of kids, when I see what they're actually doing, we're going to record it, we're going to report on it. I'm writing articles in the Davis Vanguard, and we're going to keep doing that. Thank you, Johnny, for deleting that. Yeah, they love to call me, I am a grandma, so I don't care if people call me that, but they seem to love coming in and just trolling. So, Johnny, you're doing a great job on moderating those. I just noticed a couple that you got rid of. Okay, so what I wanted to do today is, we're going to get a lot of rain, and so I'm going to have to change how I'm going about doing things, plus the holidays coming up this week. And I really do want to remind everybody that the holidays are a really tricky time for people who are caught in family court. And for those of us who had parents that were divorced, my parents divorced back in the 70s, my parents didn't go in court for longer than maybe 6 months, and they worked everything out on their own. We just figured out how we were going to do holidays. I saw my dad equal, my mom obviously had primary custody because I lived with her and was in school, but I spent a lot of time with my dad. I spent the holidays with my dad, and it has been shocking to me to be in family court, just observing these proceedings and seeing what happens when the government gets involved in these family issues. And we can easily say, well, these are people who are fighting and they deserve it or whatever. But at the center of that are some kids whose entire childhoods are being spent with their parents in family court. And not always because of the parents, but because the lawyers that get involved. And we're going to talk about family court judges appointing these lawyers. In some states, they call them gals. And in other states, here in California, we call them minors counsel. And so we look at the individuals who are appointed, we look at the process, we look at the judges that are appointing them, and we also have been looking at the history of minors counsel, because the California State Auditor did an audit on family courts in Marin and Sacramento County, and in Santa Clara County, there were parents protesting in the 1990s after they were losing custody of their kids. And you have to start asking yourself, why is it that people who are involved in a divorce are suddenly losing custody of their children? And the people who are losing custody merely on allegations made or on investigations because somebody called CPS, and we know the problems with CPS. But family court judges have a lot of tools. They have a lot of discretion and they have a lot of tools. And for the most part, attorneys and other judges just don't want to know. They don't want to get involved in family court. It's like doctors not wanting to know what an OBGYN does when they do a pap smear. That's literally how it feels when it comes to family court, that these attorneys don't want to know what divorce attorneys are doing, or they just think that everybody has a job to do and they're doing it and they're following the law. There is Obviously, in criminal court, we've seen lots of violations of due process, and very few people get appeals. Very few times does the Court of Appeal actually work. But in family court, the violations of due process to people are so problematic that we see it on a regular basis. And what it translates to is it's going to cost families a lot of money. Families that were either working class families or middle class families that were getting along fine and that probably could even get along after a divorce are going through these court systems for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And they're just having they're losing their jobs because they have so many court hearings. And who says this is strictly a rich problem? It really is not a rich problem. If you are going into family court in California and attorneys get involved and incompetent judges get a hold of your case because you can't divide it up and get it done on your own, and you get into the courts, it is no different than being arrested and being put through the criminal courts. It's dysfunctional. It affects working class. It affects middle class people. And middle class people in California are simply defined as people who might have owned their homes for a long time and have some equity in it. And these attorneys and family court judges eye that. It used to be that a family home, they would figure out who was going to keep it and who was going to buy the other one out. Now the judges and attorneys want to sell that house, liquidate it, and distribute the equity in it for the parents. I have people tell me all the time, oh, I'm fine, I own my house. I can speak from personal experience. Once the court takes jurisdiction of your lives, they can sell your house and they can liquidate it and they can give all the money away however they want with the power of the pen. But today, I don't want to talk about the money issues so much, except as taxpayers are paying for this. I want to talk about what the courts are doing when they're appointing these attorneys, known as gals in some states, and also known as minors counsel. So the first thing that happens is a judge has to have a reason. And the reasons are very limited. They don't need much of a reason. They can just say an allegation of abuse, or they can say an arrest or something that has happened to the family that is involved in a divorce justifies using certain tools. And one of the tools is the appointment of minors counsel. These are attorneys, and each court in the 58 courts in the state have an ability to create what they call a minors counsel panel. And I did a short video of going to Netta Ledgerwood's office last week. And Netta Ledgerwood is a divorce attorney who is a member of the local bar association. That's similar to being a member of a police association. And she's in charge of communications to and from the court and this small group of attorneys that are known as minors counsel. And to get on the panel for minors counsel, the attorneys have to take 8 hours of courses, which, you know, they don't have to be parents, they don't have to have any, they don't have to be mandated reporters, they don't have to have any experience in it. They just take a class for 8 hours, and as long as they do that every year and fill out the paperwork, then what they're doing is saying, we're available to be appointed as minors counsel. By the way, I had a pen explode on me, and so I blew ink all over my hand. I don't have a disease. Paper cuts and exploding pens are part of my reason why I hate paperwork. So these minors counsel, not every county has a panel. And if you go to the court's website in Santa Clara County, you can find the panel of attorneys. These are attorneys. It's a one-page document that say, we're available to represent kids by appointment. So then a family court judge says, okay, we're going to need a minors counsel in this case. The judge doesn't care if you can afford to pay this attorney or not. They don't care really if one is needed. This is really a way for judges to bring in their buddies, the attorneys that are buying them lunches and taking them places. The minors counsel really can give them it gives judges an ability to pick who they like. It's kind of like teacher's pet of the courts. And the minors counsel can either be ordered to be paid by the parents at the minors counsel open rate. And an open rate, I've been in publishing for a long time, so I go by advertising rack rates. When we used to charge advertisers, we would have a rack rate. That was what we would charge anybody that walked in off the street to buy advertising. That's what attorneys charge as their rack rates. It could be $400 an hour, it could be $1,200 an hour. It's whatever they decide is their rack rate for their personal business. And if a judge appoints an attorney whose rack rate is $325 an hour and says the parents have an ability to pay it, then the parents are suddenly paying for a child to have an attorney during their divorce. And they're paying that attorney $325, and that's in addition to all their court costs, their own attorney costs if they have attorneys. It's in addition to child support payments. It's in addition to transcript costs. It's in addition to if you get put on supervised visitation and have to pay $50 to $100 an hour, it's in addition to that. And so judges have what we call the discretion to determine if either the parents are going to pay or if the taxpayers are going to pay. And when a judge makes a finding, that is a legal term, they make a finding that the parents can pay, then the parents are going to be ordered to pay the minors' counsel's fees. For every time the minors' counsel is communicating with the parents' attorneys, the parents, going to the school, going to the doctors, and minors' counsel have a lot of power. They have more legal power than the parents do. So the moment you go into court and can't agree and split your time with your kids and divide your property on your own, you get married without a lawyer, but the moment you go into court and the moment you hire attorneys, you're giving the government permission to make decisions, not only about what will happen to your children, but how much you and taxpayers will pay to deal with that. So once an attorney is appointed as a minors' counsel, then they have to fill out, and I showed this in my last live stream, which I've now made for minors' counsel, for members only. And I'm going to start doing that more. I want to thank my members. If you guys support this channel, you are supporting our work. We don't get paid other than, occasionally for an article we write here and there, we might make $50. And the editing time and everything that goes into that is a lot of time and effort. We make a little money from our social media platforms, but it is our members. It is people who send us money on Venmo or PayPal. I always put those links in my longer descriptions. And you guys are the ones that support this work. You're the ones that allow me to be able to come out and have the time to do this work. Journalists that work for large newspapers get paid for those newspapers, and they don't do this work because the newspapers don't let them do the work. And so the only way this work is getting done is by everybody who is supporting this channel, who's supporting my work. And so I am going to start doing more members only live streams and encouraging people to become members of this channel and to send donations that support the work. If the information we are giving you is helpful to you or important to you, we're showing you how to save money, taxpayer money, but also what happens to you when you go through court. If that's important, then I hope everybody will support it. So this is a document that is known as, once a minors' counsel is appointed, then they have to file an application to be paid. Sorry, the wind is picking up a little. And so that's what this is. The document, I'm gonna flip the camera around and go over it again. I did this once before, but I want to make sure that I'm really clear on what this document is, because thank you very much. I very much appreciate that support. And whoever said that they read my recent article, I am currently doing videos in conjunction with my reporting in the Davis Vanguard. It takes us about 100 hours of editing time and research time to do those articles. And then I do put the links and I try to show you the video, because when I write an article with Fred Johnson or any other people on our team, when we write articles, it takes about 100 hours of research and editing time and drafting and going back and forth, and 90% of what we find ends up on the editing room floor. So I intend to use my video platforms, especially here on YouTube, to tell you what's on the editing room floor, because we cannot fit it all in an article. Johnny, very much appreciate that. And you do way more than you should, and I always appreciate your support. And so what we, when we write those articles, we don't name every attorney, we don't name every judge, because it would be too much to process. We have to pick the worst. And right now I'm working on an article that I may be able to get done tomorrow. Otherwise it might publish on Christmas Eve, because it's really important. I think what is happening in our family courts and the impact that's having on the lives of parents and their children and grandparents and everybody else is so important that we have to report it every which way that we can. So all of your support helps us do that, because these people, you might think it's their problem, but these are your neighbors. They could be, right now I deal with a lot of nurses. I actually even deal with police officers who are going through family courts, firefighters, attorneys that are going through family courts, doctors. The stories these people tell me, I don't know how they go to work and do their jobs. I have people tell me they lose their jobs because of family court and constantly having to go to hearings, and their exes subpoenaing their records from their employer, their garnishments for child support and everything else is always really a problem. So we're going to focus on what I think is really the problem in every family court community, not only in California, but across the state. And in California, I think because we have more money in some of these counties and areas, I think it's become really a problem. So once a judge uses their power, and remember, judges get their power because the governor appoints them or voters elect them. They typically run elections unopposed. So they're going to get put back on the bench. And so if people start paying attention to the judges in their community, maybe more attorneys will run for the judge positions, and maybe we'll have more competitive elections, and maybe judges might start being more careful and reminded that they answer to the people. But we as people give judges a lot of power, we give them immunity, and we give them ability to issue orders that impact your life forever. And I'm not talking about criminal court, whether you get convicted, because you get a jury in those cases. I'm talking about judges making orders that can put you in, judges that can issue orders that might strip you of custody of your children or put you under a CLETS, DVRO, or restraining order so that you aren't allowed to have a firearm, and in most cases aren't allowed. Deciding to troll me on the phone right now during my live stream, and I have blocked it, but if they call again, I got to figure out something else to do. Okay, so once a judge appoints an attorney to a family law case as minors counsel or gals, then they have to put in an application for their fees. So I'm going to go over this one application in a case involving I've read the court files, I've read the income and expense declarations. I'm going to go over that in another live stream, just so everybody knows. When you get into family court and you're talking about support or income or child support or anything, the judges and the attorneys require you to file what we call an income and expense declaration. And that income and expense declaration covers how much money you make, how much assets you have. So if you don't want the government knowing all this, and they put it in a public court file, and once they put it in a public court file, I can see how much money from somebody working in tech, for Boston Scientific, a firefighter or nurse, anybody who is not publicly paid, I can find out how much money they're making, how much their stock options are. It is amazing what is in a family court file. And the moment you go into family court and hire an attorney, you're giving consent to put all that information in a public court file. There are very few reporters that know how to and actually look at these files, but we do. And we look at it up and down, and we look at what the judges are doing and what the attorneys are doing. So in this one case, the father in the case is a firefighter. The mother works for Boston Scientific. There were no allegations of CPS involvement or anything else. And it's confusing as to why a family court judge brought a minors counsel in the case. but it's more confusing why taxpayers are paying for it. So let me flip around to the form. So once an attorney is appointed as minors counsel, this is Leslie Holmes. She was appointed as minors counsel, and in her form, she has to declare when she was appointed and who appointed her. She was appointed on December 18th, 2020 by the Honorable Judge Stuart Scott. So that tells us how long she's been in the case. She's now filing an amended request, an application to be paid. So she is telling the court she has done work for 1 year. She's worked 17 hours. She's basically claiming that from the time she was appointed to a year later, she's put in 17.4 hours in the case, that she is at her billable rate of $325. She's being paid, she's asking for fees for $5,525. Now, if the parents are going to be ordered to privately pay her, they typically will say, okay, the mom and dad are going to share this cost. The dad can afford to pay half, the mom can pay half. Or they can say maybe the dad can afford a little bit more. He's going to pay 70%, the mom's going to pay 30%. But you're going to be paying that $5,000, and that is what a minors counsel can add to the cost of your case. That's 1 year, $5,000. People might not think that's a big deal, but imagine all of a sudden your car breaks down and your mechanic tells you, oh, surprise, it's going to cost $5,000 to get it going. You're going to have to pay this $5,000 to an attorney who represented your children. And most of these attorneys never meet with the children that they're representing. It's unclear what they're actually doing. And when you ask them what they're doing, they say, oh, they're acting in the best interests of the children. What does that mean? Nobody knows. They just make it up. And so I want to show you what was the most interesting in this court document. We're going to the second page, which I need to turn this over again. So this is the part where the minors counsel tells the court, the judge is supposed to make the ultimate decision, but the minors counsel in this case says any sums greater than 10% would be a hardship for the family, as the family already has multiple expenses for the boys, which requires out-of-pocket payments. Don't we all have expenses for our children that require out-of-pocket? Lisa, are you leaving? I hope I'll see you back in some other live streams. And if I don't, have a very Merry Christmas. And I hope you'll be back in some of our other live streams and videos as we cover this, because we are going to have some impact on our reporting. We are going to dive into this so deeply that the attorneys involved, we're going to chase misuse of public funds, and we're going to show you the impact of how public funds were being used. So Lisa, I always appreciate, Lisa Van Sickle, I always appreciate your being here, and I really appreciate your support, and I hope you have a very Merry Christmas. Okay, so back to this case where the minors counsel says, oh, I think the parents have so many expenses that the taxpayers should pay my fees. Well, attorneys don't usually do that because they're motivated to be paid their private amount. And once the judge makes a finding that the parents can't afford to pay, then the minors counsel is going to be paid by taxpayers. But they're not going to get their regular rate, whether that was $325 an hour or $1,200 an hour. They're only going to get paid, it used to be $75 and now it's $100 an hour. They're only going to be paid $100 an hour to represent the kids. But one of the things that these attorneys do is they slide in costs for their staff. So they'll say they're paying a paralegal $275. I've worked as a paralegal and as a secretary for some attorneys, and you don't get paid $275 an hour. So these attorneys are padding their bills for their staff as a workaround to make more money from a case. And we see that in almost every single case. Well, the day after I published our article, the day of when I published our article on minors counsel, and I talked about these very issues, the court had a mandatory meeting with their minors counsel. And they are changing the forms which will no longer allow these minors counsel to bill for their staff. So when we look at how our reporting is having an effect and an impact, our reporting is literally making the courts change by focusing on the judges and focusing on the attorneys and what they're doing that's bad. You cannot just say they're corrupt. You cannot just say they're all in it together. You cannot just say it's unfair. You have to show why it's unfair. And so we have been showing how these attorneys are padding the bills and the judges are rubber stamping it, causing parents to pay inflated bills or taxpayers to pay those fees. And we know that the courts are feeling the pressure because they're changing the forms and they're no longer allowing attorneys to charge for their staff. So that's one impact. But now what we're going to do is we're going to dive in and we're going to look at all these attorneys that were paid with public funds. We're going to look at how many of them padded their bills, and we're going to look at how many judges rubber stamped it. And in addition to my reporting, I file complaints. And I did file complaints. Hey, Tom Shaw, it's really great to see you in here. I always appreciate your support. John Denicola, if you're in here, great. You're a moderator too. I'm not going to do this one as long. I'm kind of wrapping up, but I really appreciate my moderators. I really appreciate my members. And I want to share with you how your support is having an impact. So our reporting over the last year on minors counsel alone has seen an impact in that now attorneys can no longer pad their bills with staff charges. And the other change that is happening is we saw minors counsel, because judges can decide willy-nilly if parents are paying or taxpayers are paying, they use minors counsel payments as punishment. And what they do is, I had one, in fact, the person who gave me this sweater, she was on Social Security disability. She had a minors counsel. Very much appreciate that constitutional clown. Appreciate all the member support. And as I said, I'm going to start doing a lot more of these for my members only. But in this one case, there was a minors counsel that charged $60,000 to represent a kid. And I'm going to go into that case because what he did in representing the kid is one of the most horrific things I've ever seen. And then when he put in his request to pay, he requested that the mother pay the majority of his fees, even though he knew she was on disability. She had 2 other children to support. And the court granted him the right to put a lien on her house in the application form. So this form is being changed. And if you look, they used to allow them to get judgments that would put liens on your house. So imagine we've gone from a judge saying, I need to appoint this attorney to represent your kids in their best interests, even though there's no constitutional right for those kids to have an attorney, to that attorney billing taxpayers and parents to the point where one of the attorneys, Arthur Lynn, put a $60,000 lien on a mother's home who didn't have the ability to pay. And now if she wants to sell that home to move to a less expensive area, Arthur Lynn is going to get $60,000 plus 10% interest every year, which accumulates at $6,000. So he is probably going to be up to $100,000 when she sells the house. Because there's a lien, he automatically gets paid. And that's how minors counsel are stealing money and telling you they're doing this in the best interest of your children. How is it in children's best interest to put their parents in debt or to burden taxpayers with representation that children don't have a constitutional right for and most of the time don't have a need for? Good minors counsel, de-escalate the conflict, don't charge a fortune, and get out of the case. Attorneys like Arthur Lynn and these other attorneys that stay in these cases for years are burdening taxpayers, and they're burdening individuals privately that are getting liens put on their houses or their wages garnished. So we're going to keep up this reporting because while there are other people that report on the big issues and child support and federal funding and everything else, federal funding is mixed into the court's general fund. And so when attorneys are being paid from that fund and they're padding their bills and they're cheating and judges aren't doing anything about it, we're going to dive into that. We're going to name names and we're going to show it. until it changes. And eventually, we've already partially defunded Minors Counsel with these changes coming in 2026. I want to see Minors Counsel completely defunded so that parents and taxpayers aren't further burdened. Then once we finish with Minors Counsel, we're going to move on to these attorneys that are acting as private judges and not giving access to their proceedings and really thumbing their nose at the public and not giving access and acting like they don't have to give us that right when they're being privately paid to do the job of a public court judge. So our focus on this channel is on attorneys that are stealing from parents and taxpayers and attorneys that aren't following the law related to public access. And we're going to keep this reporting, we're going to keep these videos going until we get it defunded, and there has always been a result. So when you watch other platforms, it's great to see the culture, but I hope that you will start demanding that when people are reporting on something or First Amendment auditing, make sure that there's a purpose and that we have impact on what we're doing, because otherwise we're just wasting our time. And I'm not going to waste your time with all the support you guys have given me. So I want to wish everybody a very Merry Christmas. I don't care if that's not politically correct. I celebrate Christmas. Christmas Eve is one of my favorite days of the year. And my heart goes out to everybody who's been affected by family court and aren't seeing their children for Christmas. And I will continue this reporting until we address these issues and we see positive change. So we already have started that in 2025, and in 2026, all I want to do is be able to tell you the impact this reporting has had. So Merry Christmas, everybody. We may get one more live stream in before the holiday, but thank you very much for being here.